Greetings. My name is Zoph, and I am the co-director of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, this live performance that we're doing for you, a live staged reading. We're really grateful for the chance to do this. We have almost 30 performers that came together over the past month to bring this to you. So I hope you enjoy. Just one quick note, we are starting the show to do homage to its beginning. So the very beginning will be in Middle English, the very end will be in Middle English, but the rest of the show will be done in modern English so you can all appreciate and understand it. Thank you for watching.
Sithin the siege and the assault was seized at Troia. The bore Britain and Brent to Brondus and Ascus, the tolk that the Tramus of treason thereof was treed for his treacheria, the truest on earth. It was Ennius the Athel and his Hia kinder that sithin the preached provinces and Patronus become well nigh of all of the wella in the West Elis. Through rich Romulus to Rome, riches him sweeter, with great babounds the burg he be us upon first, and nevertheless hit his own Noma as hit now hot. Titius to Tuscan and Teldus beginnus, Langobard in Lombardia liftus up Homers, and fair over the French flood, Felix Brutus, on many bunkers full broad, Breton he set us with wind. Where wear and rack and wonder, besaithus had want therein, and oft both bliss and blunder, for skate has skifted sin.
Soon as the siege and assault had ceased at Troy, the burg broken and burnt to brands and ashes, the traitor who trammels of treason there wrought was tried for his treachery, the foulest on earth. It was Aeneas the noble and his high kin who then subdued provinces. Lords they became well nigh of all the wealth in the Western Isles. Forth rich Romulus to Rome rapidly came, with great business that burg he builds up first, and names it with his name as now it has. Titius to Tuscany and townships begins. Langobard and Lombardy lifts up homes, and fared over the French flood, Felix Brutus, on many banks all broad Britain he settles then, where war and wreck and wonder betimes have worked within, and oft both bliss and blunder have held sway swiftly since.
And when this Britain was built by this baron rich, bold men were bred therein, of battle beloved. In many a troubled time, turmoil that wrought. More flames on this fold have fallen here oft than any other I know of since that same time. But of all that here built, of Britain the kings, ever was Arthur the highest, as I have heard tell. And so of earnest adventure I aim to show that astonishes sight, as some men do hold it, an astounding action of Arthur's wonders. If you will but list this lay a little while, I'll tell it straight, as I in town heard it with tongue, as it was said and spoken, in story staunch and strong, with linked letters loaded, as in this land so long.
This king lay at Camelot nigh on Christmas, with many lovely lords, of leaders the best, reckoning of the round table all the rich brethren, with right ripe revel and reckless mirth. There tourneyed tykes by times full many, jousted full jollily these gentle knights, then carried to court their carols to make. For there the feast was alike full 15 days, with all the meat and mirth men could devise. Such clamor and glee glorious to hear, Dear din in the daylight, dancing of nights, all was happiness high in halls and chambers, with lords and ladies as them all best. With all that's well in the world were they together, the knights best known under the Christ himself, and the loveliest ladies that ever life honored, and he, the comeliest king that the court rules. For all were fair folk in their first age still, the happiest under heaven, king noblest in his will, that it were hard to reckon so hardy a host on hill.
While New Year was so young, it was new come in. That day, double on the dais, was the dole served. For the king was come with knights into the hall, and chanting in the chapel had chimed to an end. Loud cry was there cast of clerics and others, Noel nurtured anew and named full oft, and see the rich run forth to render presents, yelled their gifts on high, yield them to hand. Argued busily about those same gifts. Ha ha, ladies laughed out loud, though they had lost, while he that won was not wrath, that you'll know. All the smirth they made at the mealtime. When they had washed well, they went to be seated, the best of the barons above, as it seemed best, with Guinevere full gaily gracing their midst, dressed on the dais there, adorned all about, splendid silk by her sides, and sheer above of true Toulouse, of Tartar tapestries plenty, that were embroidered bright with the best gems, that might be price proved with pennies any a day. The comeliest to the cry glanced there with eye and gray, a seemly ever to the sight, sooth might no man say.
But Arthur would not eat till all were served. He was so joyous a youth and somewhat boyish. He liked his life lively. He loved the less either to long lie idle or to long sit. So busied him his young blood and his brain wild. And also another matter moved him so that he had nobly named he would never eat on such dear days, before he had been advised of some adventurous thing, an unknown tale, of some mighty marvel that he might believe, of ancestors, arms, or other adventures, or else till someone beseeched for some sure knight to join with him in jousting, in jeopardy to lay down life for life, allow each to the other, as fortune might favor them, a fair advantage. This was the king's custom when he in court was, at each fine feast among his many friends in hall. Therefore, with fearless face he stands straight and tall, full lively at that new year, much mirth he makes withal.
Thus there stands straight and tall the king himself, talking at the high table of trifles full courtly. There good Gwain was graced by Guinevere beside, and Agravain a la Duraman on the other side sits. Both the king's sister sons and full sure knights, Bishop Baldwin above, he begins the table, and Iwain, Urien's son, ate alongside him. These sat high on the dais and deftly served, and many another sat sure at the side tables. Then the first course came with crack of trumpets, with many a banner full bright that thereby hung, new noise of kettle drums and noble pipes, wild warbles and wide wakened echoes, that many a heart full high heaved at their notes. Dainties drawn in therewith of full dear meats, foods of the freshest, and in such files of dishes, they find no room to place them people before, and to set the silver that holds such servings on cloth. Each his load as he liked himself. There ladled and nothing loath. Every two had dishes 12, good beer and bright wine both.
Now will I of their service say you no more, for each man may well know no want was there. Another noise full near with speed that would give the Lord leave to take meat. For scarce was the noise not a while ceased, and the first course in the court duly served. There hails in at the hall door a dreadful man, the most in the world's mold of a measure high, from the nape to the waist, so swart and so thick, and his loins and his limbs so long and so great, half giant on earth, I think now that he was. But the most of man anyway I mean him to be, and that the finest in his greatness that might ride. For of back and breast, though his body was strong, both his belly and waist were worthily small, and his features all followed his form made clean. Wonder at his hue men displayed, set in his semblance seen. He fared as giant were made, and all over deepest green.
And all garbed in green, this giant and his gear. A straitcoat full tight that stuck to his sides, a magnificent mantle above, masked within with pelts paired pertly, the garment agleam with blithe ermine full bright, and his hood both, that was left from his locks and laid on his shoulders. Neat, well-hauled hose of that same green that clung to his calves, and sharp spurs under a bright gold on silk stockings rich barred, and no shoes under sole were the same rides. And all his vesture verily was bright verdure, both the bars of his belt and other bright stones that were richly rayed in his bright array about himself and his saddle on silk work. It were torturous to tell of these trifles the half. Embroidered above with birds and butterflies, with gay gaudy of green, the gold ever inmost. The pendants of his harness, the proud crupper, his bridle, and all the metal enameled was then. The stirrups he stood on stained with the same, and his saddle bows after, and saddle skirts, ever glimmered and glinted all with green stones. The horse he rode in on was also of that hue, certain. A green horse, great and thick, a steed full strong to restrain, embroidered bridle quick. To the giant he brought gain.
Well garbed was this giant, geared in green. The hair of his head, like his horse's mane, fair fanned out flax and folds his shoulders. A beard, big as a bush, over his breast hangs. That, with a haul of hair from his head, reaches was clipped all round about above his elbows, that half his hands thereunder were hidden the wise of a king's broad cape that clasped at his neck. The mane of that mighty horse was much alike, well crisp and combed, with knots full many plaited in gold thread about the fair green, here a thread of hair and there of gold. The tear in his forelock twinned of a suit and bound both with a band of bright green, dressed with precious stones as its length lasted, then twined with a thong, a tight knot aloft, where many bells bright of burnished gold ring. Such a man on a mount, such a giant that rides, was never before that time in hall in sight of human eye. He looked as lightning bright, said all that him described, it seemed that no man might his mighty blows survive.
And yet he had no helm, nor hauberk neither, nor protection, nor plate pertinent to arms, nor no shaft, nor no shield to strike and smite, but in one hand he held a holly branch, that is greatest in green, when groves are bare, and an axe in the other, one huge, monstrous, a parlous spar, to expound in speech who might. The head of an Elrond its large length had, the spike all of green steel and of gold hewn, the blade bright burnished with a broad edge, as well shaped to shear as are sharp razors, the shaft of a strong staff the stern man gripped, that was wound with iron. to the wand's end, and all engraved with green in gracious workings. A cord lapped it about that linked at the head, and so around the handle looped full oft, with dried tassels thereto attached enough, on buttons of the bright green, broidered full rich. This stranger rides in, and the hall enters, driving to the high dais, danger unfearing. Hailed he never a one, but high he overlooked. The first words he spoke, "Where is," he said, "the governor of this throng? Gladly I would see that soul in sight, and with himself speak reason." Then on knights he cast his eyes, and rolled them up and down. He stopped and studied I, who was of most renown.
There was a looking at length the man to behold, for each man marveled at what it might mean for a rider and his horse to own such a hue, as green grew grass, and greener it seemed than green enamel on gold glowing the brighter. All studied that steed and stalked him near, with all the wonder of the world what he might do, for marvels they had seen, but such never before, and so of phantom and fairy the folk there it deemed. Therefore to answer was many a knight afraid, and all stunned at his shout, and sat stock still in silence sudden throughout the rich hall, as all had slipped into a deep sleep. So ceased their noise and cry. I think it not all in fear, but some from courtesy, to let him all should revere speak to him firstly.
Then Arthur, before the high dais that adventure beholds, and gracious him reverenced, afeard was he never. And he said, "Sir, welcome indeed to this place. The head of this house I, Arthur, am named. Alight swiftly adown and rest, I thee pray, and what thy will is, we shall wait after." "Nay, so help me," quoth the man, "he that on high sits to wait any while in this way, it was not my errand. But as the light of thee, Lord, is lifted so high, and thy burg and thy barons the best men hold, strongest under steel gear on steeds to ride, the wisest and worthiest of the world's kind, proof to play against in all other sports, here is shown courtesy, as I have heard said. So then I wandered hither indeed at this time. You may be sure by this branch that I bear here, that I pass by in peace and no plight seek. For where I found here fierce and in fighting wise, I had a hauberk at home and a helm both, a shield and a sharp spear shining bright, and other weapons to wield I well will too. But as I wish no war, I wear the softer. But if you be as bold as all barons tell, you will grant me goodly the gift that I ask by right." Arthur answered there and said, "Sir courteous knight, if you crave battle bear, here fails you not the fight."
"Nay, follow I no fight, in faith I thee tell. About these benches are but beardless children. If I were clasped in armor on a high steed, here is no man to match me, his might so weak. From thee I crave in this court a Christmas gift, for it is Yule and New Year, and here so many young men. If any so hardy in this house holds himself, is so bold of blood, hot-brained in his head, that dare staunchly strike a stroke for another, I will give him as a gift this weapon so rich, this blade that is heavy enough to handle as he likes, and I will bear the first blow, as bare as I sit. If any friend be so fell as to fare as I say, leap lightly toward me. Latch on to this weapon. I quit claim forever He holds it as his own, and I will stand his stroke straight on this floor, if you will grant me the gift to give him another again, and yet give him his respite, a 12-month and a day. Now hurry, let's see, all right? Dare any herein aught say?
If he had stunned them first, stiller were then all the host in the hall, the high and the low. The man on his mount he turned in his saddle, and roundly his red eyes he rolled about, bent his bristling brows burning green, waving his beard about, waiting who would rise. When none would come to his call, he coughed full high, and cleared his throat full richly, ready to speak. What? Is this Arthur's house, quoth the horseman then, that all the rumor runs of through realms so many? Where now your superiority and your conquests, your grinding down in your anger, your great words? Now is the revel and the renown of the Round Table overthrown with the word of a wanderer's speech. For all duck down in dread without dint of a blow. With this he laughed so loud that the Lord grieved. The blood shot for shame into his fair face, and there he waxed as wrath as wind. So did all that there were. The king, so keen by kind, then stood that strong man near.
And said, Horseman, by heaven you ask as a fool, and as a folly you feign, to find it me behooves. I know no guest that's aghast at your great words. Give me now your weapon upon God's name, and I shall bear you the boon you'd be having. Lightly he leaped to him and caught at his hand. Then fiercely the other fellow on foot alighted. Now has Arthur his axe, and the helm grips and strongly stirs it about to strike with a thought. The man before him drew himself to full height, higher than any in the house by a head and more. With stern face here he stood, he stroked his beard, and with fixed countenance tugged at his coat, no more moved or dismayed by mighty blows than if any man to the bench had brought him a drink of wine. Gwain that sat by the queen, to the king he did incline. I beseech in plain speech that this melee be mine.
Would you, worthiest lord, quoth Gwain to the king, bid me bow from this bench and stand by you there, that I without villainy might void this table, and if my lady liked it not ill, I would come counsel you before your court fair. For I think it not seemly, as it is true known, that such an asking is heaved so high in your hall that you yourself are tempted to take it to yourself, while so many bold men about you on benches sit, that under heaven, I hope, are none higher of will, nor better of body on fields where battle is raised. I am the weakest, I know, and of wit feeblest, least worth the loss of my life, who learn the truth. Only inasmuch as you are my uncle, and I praised, no bounty but your blood in my body I know. And since this thing is folly, and not to you falls, and I have asked it of you first, grant it to me. And if my cry be not comely, let this court be free of blame. Nobles whispered around, and after counseled the same, to free the king and crown, and give Gwain the gain.
Then commanded the king the knight for to rise, and he readily uprose and prepared him fair, knelt down before the king, and caught the weapon, and he lightly lifted him, and lifted up his hand, and gave him God's blessing, and gladly bade him that his heart and his hand should hardy be both. Take care, cousin, quoth quoth the king, how you set on. And if you read him aright, readily I trow that you shall abide the blow he shall bring after. Gwain goes to the giant with weapon in hand, and boldly abides him, never bothered the less. Then, to Sir Gwain, says the knight in the green, reaffirm we our oaths before we go further. First, I entreat you, man, how are you named? That tell me truly then, so trusted I may. In God's faith, quoth the good knight, Gwain am I, that bears you this buffet, whatever befalls after. And at this time 12-month take from thee another, with what weapon you wilt, and no help from any alive. The other replies again, Sir Gwain, may I so thrive, if I am not wondrous fain, for you this blow to drive.
By God, quoth the Green Knight, Sir Gwain, I like that I'll face first from your fist what I found here. And you have readily rehearsed, with reason full true, clearly all the covenant that I the king asked, save that you shall secure me, say by your troth, that you shall seek me yourself, whereso you think I may be found upon field, and fetch you such wages as you deal me today before this dear company. Where should I seek? Quoth Gwain. Where is your place? I know nothing of where you walk. By him that wrought me, nor do know you, knight, your court, or your name. But teach me truly the tack. Tell me how you are named, and I shall wind all my wit to win me thither. And that I swear you in truth, and by my sure honor. That is enough this new year. It needs no more, quoth the giant in green to courteous Gwain. If I shall tell you truly, when you have tapped me, and you me smoothly have smitten, I swiftly you teach of my house and my home and my own name. Then may you find how I fare, and hold to your word. And if I spend no speech, then it speeds you the better, for you may linger in your land and seek no further. But oh, take now the grim steel to thee, and see how you fell oaks. Gladly, sir, indeed, quoth Gwain, his axe he strokes.
The Green Knight on his ground graciously stands, with a little lean of the head flesh he uncovers. Long lovely locks he laid over his crown, and let the naked neck to the stroke show. Gwain gripped his axe and glanced it on high, his left foot on the field before him he set, letting it down lightly, light on the naked, that the sharper the steel sundered the bones, and sank through soft flesh and sliced it in two. The blade of the bright steel bit the ground. The fair head from the frame fell to the earth. The folk flailed it about with feet where it rolled forth. Blood burst from the body bright on the green, yet nevertheless neither falters nor falls the fellow. But stoutly he started forth on strong shanks, roughly he reached out where the ranks stood, latched on to his lovely head and lifted it so, and then strode to his steed, the bridle he catches, steps into the stirrup and strides him aloft, and his head by the hair in his hand holds, as steadily and staunch him in his saddle sat, as if no mishap had him ailed, though headless now. Instead, he twined his trunk about that ugly body that bled. Many of him had doubt ere ever his speech was said.
For the head in his hand he holds up even towards the dearest on the dais, addresses the face, and it lifted its eyelids and looked full wide, and made this much with his mouth, which you may now hear. Look, Gwain, be you geared as you go promised, and look out loyally till you me, Lord, find, as you swore in oath in this hall these nights hearing. To the Green Chapel you go. I charge you to find such a dint as you have dealt, deserved you have, to be readily yield on New Year's morn. The Knight of the Green Chapel men know me as many, therefore to find me, if you feign it, you'll never fail. Come then, or be called recreant, it behooves you. With rough riding, grasping the reins he twists, hurled out the hall door, his head in his hand, that the fire of the flint flew from his fleet hooves. To what land he came, no man there knew, no more than they knew where he had come from, what then. The king and Gwain there at the Green Man laughed and grinned, yet broadcast it was abroad, as marveled amongst those men.
Though Arthur the High King at heart had wonder, he let no semblance be seen, but said aloud to the comely queen with courteous speech, Dear dame, today dismay you never. Well becomes us these crafts at Christmas, larking at interludes to laugh and to sing among the courtly carols of lords and ladies. Nevertheless, my meat I may now me address, for I have seen my marvel, I may not deny. He glanced at Sir Gawain and graciously said, Now, sir, hang up your axe that has hewn enough. And it adorned the dais, hung on display, where all men might marvel and on it look, and by true title thereof to tell the wonder. Then they went to the board, these two together, the king and the godly knight, and keen men them served with all dainties double, as dearest might fall, with all manner of meat and minstrelsy both. Full well they wiled that day till it worked its end on land. Now think well, Sir Gawain, lest by peril unmanned, this adventure to sustain you have taken in hand.
The gift of adventure has Arthur thus on the first year of the young year, for he yearned exploits to hear. The words were wanting when they went to sit. Now they are stoked with stern work, fullness to hand. Gawain was glad to begin those games in hall. Yet if the end be heavy, have you no wonder. Though men be merry in mind when they have strong ale, a year turns full turn and yields never alike. The form of its finish foretold full seldom. For this Yuletide passed by, and the year after each season slips by, pursuing another. After Christmas comes crabbed Lenten time that forces on flesh, fish, and food more simple. But then the weather of the world with winter it fights. Cold shrinks down, clouds are uplifted, shining sheds the rain in showers full warm, falls upon fair flats, flowers there showing, both ground and groves, green is their dress. Birds begin to build and brightly sing they, the solace of the soft summer ensuing after on bank. And blossoms bloom to blow by hedges rich and rank, while nobles' notes do flow in woodland free and frank. Did I lose that? Apparently I did. Nope.
Darian reads.
After, in season of summer with the soft winds, when Zephyrus sighs himself on seeds and herbs, well away is the wort that waxes out there, when the dunking dew drops from the leaves, biting a blissful blush of the bright sun. But then highs harvest and hardens it soon, warns it before the winter to wax full ripe, then drives with drought the dust for to rise, from the face of the field to fly full high. Wild wind from the welkin wrestles the sun. The leaves lance then from linden light on the ground, and all gray is the grass that green was ere. Then all ripens and rots that rose up at first. And thus wears the year into yesterday's many, and winter walks again as the world's way is, I gauge, till Michaelmas moon threatens a wintry age. Then thinks Gwain full soon of his wearisome voyage.
Yet till All Hallows with Arthur he lingers, and he made a feast on that day for the knight's sake, with much revel and rich of the round table, knights full courteous and comely ladies, all for the love of that lad in longing they were, but none the less they named nothing but mirth. Many joyless for that gentle soul jokes made there, for, after meat, with mourning he makes to his uncle, and speaks his departure, and openly says, "Now, liege lord of my life, I ask you leave. You know the cost in this case, care I no more to tell you the trial thereof, not but a trifle. But I am bound to bear it, begone, and tomorrow, to seek the giant in the green, as God will me guide." Then the best of the burg were brought together, Gwain and Eric and others full many, Sir Dodonald le Savage, the Duke of Clarence, Lancelot and Lionel and Lucan the Good, Sir Bors and Sir Bedivere, big men both, and many other men, with Mador de la Porte. All this courtly company came the king near, for to counsel the knight, with care in their hearts. There was much dark dolefulness deep in the hall, that so worthy as Gwain should wend on that errand, to endure a dreadful dint, and no more with sword wander. The knight he made yet good cheer, and said, "Why should I falter? Such destinies foul or fair, what can men do but suffer?"
He dwelt there all day, and dressed on the morn, asked early for his arms, and all were they brought. First a crimson carpet cast over the floor, and much was the gilded gear that gleamed thereon. The strong men stepped there, and handles the steel, dressed in a doublet of silk of Turkestan, and then a well-crafted cape clasped at the top, that set with a white ermine was trimmed there within. Then they set plate shoes on his strong feet, with legs lapped in steel, with lovely greaves, with knee pieces pinned thereto, polished full clean. About his knees, fastened with knots of gold, then the cuisses, that cunningly enclosed his thick-thewed thighs, attached with thongs. And then the hauberk, linked with bright steel rings over rich wear, wrapped round the warrior, and well-burnished bracelets over both arms, elbow pieces good and gay, and gloves of plate. All that goodly gear that should bring him gain that tide, with rich coat armor, his gold spurs set with pride, girt with a blade full sure, with silk sword belt at his side.
When he was hasped in armor, his harness was rich. The least laces or loops gleamed with gold. So harnessed as he was, he hears the mass, offered and honored at the high altar. Then he comes to the king and his companions, takes his courteous leave of lords and ladies, and they him kiss and convey, commend him to Christ. By then Gringolet was game, girt with a saddle that gleamed full gaily with many gold fringes, everywhere nailed full new for that noted day. The bridle barred about with bright gold bound, the apparel of the breast guard and proud skirts, crupper, caparison, in accord with the saddle bows, and all was arrayed with rich red gold nails that all glittered and glinted as gleam of the sun. Then hefts he the helm, and hastily it kisses that was strongly stapled and stuffed within. It was high on his head, clasped behind, with a light covering over the face guard, embroidered and bound with the best gems on broad silken border, and birds on the seams, such as parrots painted preening between, turtle doves, true love knots, so thick entailed, as many burdened with it had been 7 winters in town. The circlet of greater price that embellished his crown, of diamonds all devised that were both bright and brown.
Then they showed him the shield that was of shining gules, with the pentangle painted there in pure gold hues. He brandishes it by the baldric, cast it about his neck, that suited the wearer seemly and fair. And why the pentangle implies to that prince noble, I intend to tell, though I tarry more than I should. It is a sign Solomon settled on some while back in token of truth by the title that it has. For it is a figure that has 5 points, and each line overlaps and locks with another, and everywhere it is endless, and English call it all over the land, as I hear, the endless knot. For so it accords with this knight and his bright arms, forever faithful in 5 ways, and 5 times so. Gwain was for good known, and, as purified gold, void of every villainy, with virtues adorned all, so. And thus the pentangle knew, he bore on shield and coat, as title of trust most true, and gentlest knight of note.
First, he was found faultless in his 5 senses, and then failed never the knight in his 5 fingers, and all his trust in the field was in the 5 wounds of Christ that caught on the cross, as the creed tells. And wheresoever in melee this man was stood, his first thought was that over all other things, all his force in fight he found in the 5 joys that holy heaven's queen had of her child. For this cause, the knight fittingly had on the inner half of his shield her image painted, that when he beheld her, his boldness never failed. The 5th 5 that I find the knight used was free-handedness and friendship above all things. His continence and courtesy corrupted word never, and piety that surpasses all points. These pure 5 were firmer founded in his form than another. Now all these 5 folds, forsooth, were fused in this knight, and each one joined to another, that none end had, and fixed upon 5 points that failed never, never confused on one side, nor sundered neither, without end at any angle anywhere I find, wherever its guise begins or glides to an end. Therefore, on his shining shield, shaped was the knot royally with red gold upon red gules. Thus is the pure pentangle called by people of lore. Now geared was Gwain gay, lifted his lance right there and gave them all good day, as he thought, forevermore.
He struck the steed with the spurs and sprang on his way, so strongly the stone fire sparked out thereafter. All that saw the seemly sight sighed in their hearts and said softly the same thing, all to each other, in care of that comely knight. By Christ, 'tis pity that you, Lord, shall be lost, who art of life noble. To find this fellow in field, in faith, is not easy. Warily to have wrought would wiser have been, to have dealt with yon dear man a dukedom of worth. A loyal leader of this land's lances, him well seems, and so had better have been than brought to naught, beheaded by an elvish man out of arrogant pride. Who knew any king ever such counsel to take as knights in altercation in Christmas games? Well was the water warm, much wept from Ion, when that seemly sire spurred from the court that day. He made no delay, but swiftly went his way. Many a wild path he strayed, so the books do say.
Now rides this knight through the realm of Logres, Sir Gwain in God's name, yet no game it thought. Oft Friendless, alone he lay long a nights, where he found no fare that he liked before him. He had no friend but his steed by furs and down, and no one but God to speak with on the way, till that he neared full nigh to northern Wales. All the Isle of Anglesey on the left hand he held, and fared over the fords by the forelands, over at Holyhead, till he reached the bank in the wilderness of Wirral. Few thereabouts that either God or other with good heart loved. And ever he asked as he fared of fellows he met, if they had heard any word of a knight in green, on any ground thereabout of the Green Chapel. And all met him with nay. Never in their lives saw they ever a sign of such a one hued in green. The knight took pathways strange, by many a bank ungreen. His cheerfulness would change, ere might that chapel be seen.
Many cliffs he overclambered in country strange. Far flying from his friends, forsaken he rides. At every twist of the water where the way passed, he found a foe before him, or freakish it were, and so foul and fell he was beholden to fight. So many marvels by mountain there the man finds. It would be torturous to tell a tenth of the tale. Sometimes with dragons he wars, and wolves also. Sometimes with wild woodsmen haunting the crags, with bulls and bears both, and boar other times, and giants that chased after him on the high fells. Had he not been doughty, enduring, and duty served, doubtless he had been dropped and left but dead. For war worried him not so much, but winter was worse, when the cold, clear water from the clouds shed, and froze ere it fall might to the fallow earth. Near slain by the sleet, he slept in his steel, more nights than enough in the naked rocks, where clattering from the crest the cold burn runs, and hung high over his head in hard icicles. Thus in peril and pain, and in plights full hard, covers the country this night till Christmas Eve, alone. The night that eventide to Mary made his moan, to show him where to ride, and guide him to some home.
By a mount, in the morn merrily he rides, into a forest full deep, wonderfully wide, high hills on either hand, and woodlands under hoar oaks, full huge 100 together. The hazels and hawthorns were tangled and twined with rough ragged moss, ravelled everywhere, with many birds unblithe upon bare twigs that piteously they piped for pinch of the cold. The gallant on Gringalet glides them under, through many a marsh and mire, a man alone, full of care, lest to his cost he never should see the service of that sire that on that self night of a bright maid was born, our burden to quell. And therefore sighing he said, I beseech thee, Lord and Mary, that is mildest mother so dear, of some harbor where I might hear mass and thy matins tomorrow. Meekly I ask, and thereto promptly I pray, my pater and ave and creed. He rode and he prayed, and cried for his misdeeds. He crossed himself always, and said, Christ cross me speed.
Now he had signed himself times but 3, when he was aware in the wood of a wall and a moat. Above a level, on highland locked under boughs, of many broad-set bowls about by the ditches, a castle the comeliest that ever knight owned. Perched on a plain, a park all about, with a pointed palisade planted full thick, encircling many trees in more than 2 miles. The hold on the one side the knight assessed, as it shimmered and shone through the shining oaks. Then humbly has off with his helm, highly he thanks Jesus and St. Julian that gentle are both, that courtesy had him shown, and his cry hearkened. Now hospitality, he said, I beseech you grant,
Then goats he on Gringolet with his gilded heels, and he by chance there has chosen the chief way, that brought the man bravely to the bridge's end in haste. The drawbridge was upraised, the gates firm and fast. The walls were well arrayed, it trembled at no wind's blast.
The knight stuck to his steed that hugged the bank of the deep double ditch driven round the place. The wall washed in the water wonderfully deep, and then a huge full height it hauled up aloft of hard-hewn stone to that entablature, embedded under the battlements in best style. And there were turrets, full tall, towering between, with many lovely loopholes clean interlocked. A better barbican the knight never beheld. The innermost he beheld a hall, full high, towers trim between, crenellated full thick, fair finials that fused, and fanciful long, with carven copes cunningly worked. Chalk-white chimneys he described enough on tower rooftops that gleamed full white. So many painted pinnacles powdered there among castle crenellations clustered so thick that pared out of paper purely it seemed. The fair knight on the horse and fine enough thought, if he might contrive to come the cloister within, to harbor in that hostel while holy day lasted, all content. He called, and soon there came a porter pure pleasant. From the walls his errand he craved, and hailed the knight errant.
Good sir, quoth Gwain, will you do my errand to the high lord of this house, harbor to crave? Yes, by St. Peter, quoth the porter, for I believe that you'll be welcome to dwell as long as you like. Then the welcomer on the wall went down swiftly, and folk freely him with, to welcome the knight. They let down the great drawbridge, and dignified knelt down on their knees upon the cold earth, to welcome this knight that they thought the worthiest way. They yielded him the broad gate, opened wide, and he them raised rightly, and rode over the bridge. Several then seized his saddle while he alighted, and then strong men enough stabled his steed. Knights and their squires came down then, for to bring this bold man blithely to hall. When he lifted his helmet, they hastened forward to heft it from his hand, the guest to serve. His blade and his blazon both they took. Then hailed he full handily the host, each one, and many proud men pressed close that prince to honor. All clasped in his noble armor to hall they him brought, where a fair fire on a hearth fiercely flamed. Then the lord of that land left his chamber, for to meet with manners the man on the floor. He said, you are welcome to dwell as long as you like. What is here is all your own, to have at your will and to wield you. Grand merci, quoth Gwain, may Christ reward it you. As friends that meet again, each clasped the other true.
Gwain gazed on the gallant that goodly him greet, and thought him a brave baron that the burg owned, a huge man in truth and mature in his years. Broad, bright was his beard, all beaver-hued, stern, striding strongly on stalwart shanks, face fell as the fire, and free of his speech. And while he seemed to suit, as the knight thought, the leading a lordship along of lords full good, the chief him led to a chamber, expressly commands a lord be delivered to him, humbly to serve. And there were brave for his bidding a band of men that brought him to a bright bower. The bedding was noble, of curtains of clear silk, with clean gold hems, and coverlets full curious, with comely panels of bright ermine above embroidered sides, curtains running on cords, red gold rings, tapestries tied to the wall of Toulouse, Turkestan, and underfoot on the floor that followed suit. There he was disrobed with speeches of mirth, the burden of his mail and his bright clothes. Rich robes full readily retainers brought him, to check and to change and choose of the best. Soon as he held one and hastened therein, there sat on him seemly, with spreading skirts, verdant in his visage, spring verily seemed to well nigh everyone in all its hues, glowing and lovely, all his limbs under that a comelier knight never Christ made, they thought. However he came, it seemed that he ought to be prince without peer on fields where fell men fought.
A chair before the chimney where charcoal burned, graciously set for Gwain, was graciously adorned. Coverings on quilted cushions, cunningly crafted both. And then a mighty mantle was on that man cast, of a brown silk embroidered full rich, and fair furred within with the pelts of the best, the finest ermine on earth, his hood of the same. And he sat on that settle seemly and rich, and chafed himself closely, and then his cheer mended. Straightway a table on trestles was set up full fair, clad with a clean cloth that clear white showed, the salt cellars, napkins, and silver spoons. The knight washed at his will, and went to his meat. Servants him served, seemly enough, with several soups, seasoned of the best, double bowlfuls as fitting, and all kinds of fish, some baked in bread, some browned on the coals, some seethed, some in stews savored with spices, and sauces ever so subtle that the knight liked. While he called it a feast full freely and oft most politely, at which all spurred him on politely again. This penance now you take, after it shall amend. The man much mirth did make, for the wine to his head did tend.
Then they sparred and parried in precious style with private points put to the prince himself. So he conceded courteously of that court he came, where noble Arthur is headman himself alone, that is the right royal king of the Round Table. And that is Gwain himself, who in this house sits, come there at Christmas of chance and driven. When the Lord learned what prince he had there, loud laughed he thereat, so delightful he thought it, that all men in that manse made it a joy to appear in his presence promptly that time, who all prize and prowess and purest ways appends to his person, and praises ever above all men upon earth. His honor is most. Each man full selfly said to his neighbor, now we shall see show of seemliest manners and the faultless phrases of noble speaking. What superior speech is, unasked we shall learn, since we have found this fine master of breeding. God has given us of his goodly grace, forsooth, that such a guest as Gwain grants us have. What blissful men at board for his bursting blithe at heart. What manners high may mean this knight will now impart. Whoever hears him will, I ween, of love speech learn some art.
When the dinner was done and the diners risen, it was nigh on the night that the time was near. Chaplains to the chapel took their course, ringing all men richly, as they rightly should, to the holy evensong of that high eventide. The Lord goes there too, and the lady as well. Into a comely enclosure quietly she enters. Gwain gaily goes forth, and thither goes soon. The Lord grasps him by the gown, and leads him to sit, acknowledges him with grace, calls him by name, and said he was the most welcome man in the world. And he thanked him thoroughly. They clasped each other, and sat with sober seeming the service through. Then liked the lady to look on the knight, and came from the close with many fine women. She was the fairest in feature, in flesh and complexion, and in compass and color and ways of all others, and fairer than Guinevere, as the knight thought. he strode through the chancel to squire the dame. Another lady her led by the left hand, who was older than her, and aged it seemed, and highly honored with her men about her. Not alike, though, to look on these ladies were, for if the one was fresh, the other was withered. Rich red in this one distinguished her, rough wrinkled cheeks on that other, in rolls. Kerchiefs on this one, with many clear pearls, her breast and her bright throat, bare displayed, shone sweeter than snow that's shed on the hills. That other, swathed with a wimple, wound at the throat, clothed to her swarthy chin with chalk-white veils. Her forehead folded in silk, enveloped everywhere, ringed and trellised with trefoils about. That naught was bare of the lady but the black brows, the two eyne, and nose, the naked lips. And those were sorry to see, and somewhat bleary. A great lady on earth a man might her call, by God. Her body was thick and short, her hips were round and wide, but of more lovesome sort was the other at her side.
When Gwain gazed on that gracious-looking girl, with leave asked of the Lord, he went to meet them. The elder he hails, bowing to her full low. The lovely-looking he hugs a little in his arms. He kisses her courteously, and nobly he speaks. They crave his acquaintance, and he quickly asks to be their sworn servant, if they themselves wished. They take him between them, and talking, they lead him to a chamber, to the chimney, and firstly they ask for spices, which men unstintingly hastened to bring, and the winning wine with them every time. The Lord, laughing aloft, leaps full oft, minding that mirth be made, and many a time, nobly lifts his hood, and on a spear hung it, and wished him to win the worth and honor thereof, whom most mirth might move at that Christmas time. And I shall wear by my faith to strive with the best before I lose the hood, with the help of my friends. Thus with laughing words the Lord makes all merry, for to gladden Sir Gwain with games in the hall that night. Till, when it was time, the Lord demanded light. Gwain his way did find to bed as best he might.
On the morn, when each man minds that time, our dear Lord for our destiny to die was born. Joy waxes in each house in the world for his sake. So it did there on that day, with dainties many. Both with major and minor meals were eaten. Deft men on the dais served of the best. Old ancient wife highest she sits. The Lord, so I believe, politely beside her. Gwain and the sweet lady together they sat, in the midst as the masses came together, and then through the hall, as seemed right, each man in his degree was graciously served. There was meat, there was mirth, there was much joy, for it would be a trouble for me to tell all. However, perchance I pine to make my point, but yet I know Gwain and the sweet lady, such comfort in their company caught together, through their dear dalliance of courtly words, and clean and courteous chat, closed from filth, their play surpass every princely game with which it compares. Kettle drums and trumpets, much piping of their airs, each man minded his, and those two minded theirs.
Much mirth was there driven that day, and another, and a third as thickly thronged came in thereafter. The joy of St. John's Day was gentle to hear, and was the last of the larking, the lords thought. There were guests set to go on the grey morn, so they stayed wonderfully waking and wine drank, dancing the day in with noble carols. At the last, when it was time, they took their leave, each one to wend on his way into strange parts. Gwain gave them good day. The good man grasps him and leads him to his own chamber, the chimney beside, and there he grips him tight, heartily thanks him for the fine favor that he had shown him, so to honor his house on that Christmastide, and embellish his burg with his bright cheer. Indeed, sir, while I live, I am better for Gwain being my guest at God's own feast. Grant merci, sir, quoth Gwain. In good faith it's yours, all the honor is your own. The high king requite you, and I am here at your will, to work your behest, as I am beholden to do, in high things and low, by right. The Lord was at great pains to keep longer the night. To him answers Gwain, that by no means he might.
Then the Lord aimed full fair at him, asking what daring deed had driven him at that dear time so keenly from the king's court to stray all alone before the holy holiday was hailed out of town. Forsooth, sir, quoth the knight, you say but the truth. A high errand and a hasty had me from those halls, for I am summoned myself to seek for a place, with no thought in the world where to go find it. I would not dare fail find it by New Year's morning for all the land in Logres. So have me our Lord help. So, sir, this request I make of you here, that you tell me true, if ever you tale you heard of the Green Chapel, on what ground it stands, and of the night that keeps it, the color of green. There was established by statute a pact of us between to both meet at that mark if I should live. And of that same new year but little is wanting. And I would look on that Lord if God would let me more gladly by God's Son than any goods gain. So indeed, by your leave, it behooves me to go. Now to work this business I've barely 3 days, and it's fitter I fall dead than fail of my errand. Then laughing, quoth the Lord, now stay, it behooves you, for I'll teach you the trysting place ere the term's end. The Green Chapel upon ground grieve for no more. But you shall be in your bed, sir, at your ease, while day unfolds, and go forth on the first of the year, and come to that mark at mid-morn, to act as you wish and when. Dwell until New Year's Day, and rise and ride on then. You shall be shown the way. It's not 2 miles hence.
Then was Gwain full glad, and gleefully he laughed. Now I thank you thoroughly, beyond all things. Now achieved is my goal. I shall at your will dwell here, and do what else you deem fit. Then the Lord seized him, and set him beside, and the ladies had fetched to please him the better. There was seemly solace by themselves still. The Lord lofted for love notes so merry, as one that wanted his wits, nor knew what he did. Then he cried to the night, calling aloud, You have deemed to do the deed that I bid. Will you hold to this promise here and now? Yes, sire, indeed, said the knight, and true. While I bide in your burg, I'm at your behest. As you have traveled, quoth the Lord, from afar, and since then waked with me, you are not well served, neither of sustenance nor of sleep, surely I know. You shall linger in your room and lie there at ease tomorrow till mass, and then to meet when you will, with my wife, that with you shall sit and comfort you with company till I come to court time spend. And I shall early rise, a hunting will I wend. Gwain thinks it wise, as it fitting to him bends.
And further, quoth the Lord, a bargain we'll make. Whatsoever I win in the wood is worthily yours. But whatever here you achieve, exchange me for it. Sweet sir, swap we so, swear it in truth, whether, Lord, that way lies worse or better. By God, quoth Gwain the good, I grant it you, and that you lust for to play, like it methinks. Who'll bring us a beverage this bargain to make? So said the lord of that land. They laughed each one. They drank and dallied and dealt in trifles, these lords and ladies, as long as they liked. And then with frankish faring, full of fair words, they stopped and stood and softly spoke, kissing full comely and taking their leave.
By many lively servants with flaming torches, each brave man was brought to his bed at last full soft. To bed yet ere they sped, repeating the contract oft. The old lord of that spread could keep a game aloft.
Full early, before the day, the folk were risen. Guests who would go, their grooms they called on, and they busied them briskly, the beasts to saddle, tightening their tackle, trussing their baggage. The richest readied themselves to ride all arrayed, leaping up lightly, latched onto their bridles, each rode out the way he most liked. The beloved lord of the land was not the last, arrayed for the riding, with ranks full many, ate a sop hastily. When he had heard mass, with horns to the hunting field he hastens away. By the time that daylight gleamed upon the earth, he with his knights on high horses were. Then the cunning hunters coupled their hounds, unclosed the kennel door and called them out, blew briskly on their bugles 3 bare notes. Brock's bayed therefore, and bold noise made, and men chastised and turned those that chasing went. 100 of hunters, as I have heard tell of the best, to station keepers strode, huntsmen leashes off cast, great rumpus in that woods there rose with their good blasts.
At the first call of the quest quaked the wild. Deer drove for the dales, darting for dread, hied to the high ground, but swiftly they were stayed by the beaters with their stout cries. They let the hearts with high branched heads have way, the brave bucks also with their broad antlers. For the noble lord had bidden that in close season no man there should meddle with those male deer. The hinds were held back with a hey and a where. The does driven with great din to the deep coves. There men might see, as they loosed, the slanting of arrows. At each winding of the wood whistled a flight that bit into brown flanks. With broad blade heads, what screaming and bleeding! By banks they lay dying, and ever the hounds in a rush hard on them followed. Hunters with high horn calls hastened them after. Such a crack and cry as cliffs were bursting. What wild beasts so escaped the men shooting were all dragged down and rent by the new reserves. When hunted from high ground and harried to water, the lads were so skilled at the lower stations, and the greyhounds so great, that gripped so quickly and dragged them down as swift, I swear, as sight. In bliss without alloy does the Lord does spur or alight, and passes that day with joy, and so to the dark night.
Thus lurks the Lord by Lindenwood eaves, while Gwain the good man gaily abed lies, lurks till the daylight gleams on the walls under canopy full clear, curtained about. As in slumber he lay, softly he heard a little sound at his door, and it slid open, and he heaved his head up out of the clothes. A corner of the curtain he caught up a little, and watched warily to make out what it might be. It was the lady, the loveliest to behold, that drew the door after her full silent and still, and bent her way to the bed. And the knight, ashamed, laid him down again lightly, and feigned to sleep. And she stepped silently and stole to his bed, caught up the curtain, and crept within, and sat her full softly on the bedside, and lingered there long to look when he wakened. The Lord lay low, lurked a full long while, compassing in his conscience what this case might mean or amount to, marveling in thought. But yet he said to himself, more seemly it were to descry with speech in a space what she wishes. Then he wakened and wriggled, and to her turned, and lifted his eyelids, and let on he was startled, and signed himself with his hand, as with prayer to be safer, with chin and cheek full sweet, both white and red together. Full graciously did she greet, lips light with laughter.
Good morning, Sir Gwain, said that sweet lady. You are a sleeper unsafe, that one may slip hither. Now you are taken in a trice, lest a truce we shape. I shall bind you in your bed, that you may trust. Ha ha ha! All laughing, the lady made her light jest. Good morrow, sweet, quoth Gwain the blithe. I shall work your will, and that I well like, for I yield me swiftly and sure for grace, and that is the best to my mind, since behooves I must. And thus he jested again with much blithe laughter. Ha ha ha! But would you, lovely lady, but grant me leave and release your prisoner, and pray him to rise, I bound from this bed, and dress me better, I should discover more comfort in speaking with you. Nay, bold sooth, Beausire, said that sweet, you shall not rise from your bed. I charge you better. I shall wrap you up here on this other side, and then chat with my knight whom I have caught. For I know well indeed, Sir Gwain, you are that all the world worships wherever you ride. Your honor, your courtesy is nobly praised among lords, among ladies, all who bear life. And now you are here indeed, and we on our own. My lord and his lords are far off faring. Other knights are abed, and my ladies also. The door drawn shut with a strong hasp. And since I have in this house him who all like, I shall work my time while it lasts with a tale. You are welcome to my body, your pleasure to take all. I must by necessity your servant be, and shall.
In good faith, quoth Gwain, against that methinks, though I am not now of him of whom you are speaking, to reach such reverence as you rehearse here, I am ways unworthy, I know myself well. By God, I'd be glad though if you saw it fit in speech or service that I might set myself to the pleasing of your worth, that were pure joy. In good faith, Sir Gwain, quoth the sweet lady, the worth and prowess that pleases all others. If I slighted or thought light of it, there were little grace, but there are ladies enough that would far rather have you, dear man, to hold as I have you here, to dally dearly in your delightful words, comfort themselves and ease their cares, than make much of the treasure and gold they have. But as I love the same Lord than the heavens that rules, I have worthy in my hand all desire through grace. She made him thus sweet cheer, and who of so fair a face, the knight with speeches clear answered her every case.
Madam, quoth the merry man, Mary give you grace, for I have found in good faith your friendship is noble. Others gain full much of other folks' praise for their deeds, but the deference they deal me is undeserved in my case. It is honor to you that naught but good you perceive. By Mary, quoth the lady, methinks it otherwise, for were I worth all the wonder of women alive, and all the wealth of the world were in my hand, and I should bargain to win myself a brave lord, with the qualities that I know of you, knight, here, of beauty and debonair and blithe seeming, that I hearkened to ere now and have here found true, then should no errand on earth before you be chosen. Indeed, lady, quoth the knight, you have done much better. But I am proud of the value you place on me, and solemnly your servant, my sovereign I hold you, and your knight I become, and Christ reward you. Thus they mulled many matters till mid-morn passed, and ever the lady let fall that she loved him much, yet the knight held to his guard, and acted full fair. Though I were loveliest lady, so her mind had it, the less is their love in his load. For his fate he sought that one, the stroke that should him cleave, and it must needs be done. The lady then sought to leave, he granting her that boon.
Then she gave him good day, and with a laughing glance, stunned him as she stood there with cutting words. May he who speeds each speech reward you the sport. But that you should be Gwain, it baffles the mind. Wherefore, quoth the knight, and urgently asked, fearful lest he had failed in forms of politeness. But the lady blessed him, and spoke as follows. One gracious as Gwain is rightly held to be, with courtesy contained so clear in himself, could not lightly have lingered so long with a lady, but he had craved a kiss out of courtesy, with some trifling touch at some tale's end. Then quoth Gwain, indeed, let it be as you like, I shall kiss at your command, as befits a knight. And further, lest I displease you, so plead no more. She comes nearer at that, and catches him in her arms, leans lovingly down, and the Lord kisses. They graciously commend to Christ one another, and she goes out at the door with not a word more. He readies himself to rise and hurries anon, calls to his chamberlain, chooses his clothes, going forth when he is ready blithely to mass. And then he went to the noble meal that awaited, and made merry all day till the moonrise at games. Was never knight fairer sung between two such noble dames, the elder and the young, much joy they had of the same.
And ever the lord of the land, intent on his games, hunted in holts and heath for barren hinds. Such a sum he there slew by the set of the sun, of does and other deer, it were deemed a wonder. Then fiercely they flocked in, folk at the last, and quickly of the quenched deer a heap they made. The noblest sped there with servants enough, gathered the quarry greatest in flesh that were there, and had them deftly undone as custom demands. Some that were there searched them in assay, and 2 fingers of fat they found on the feeblest. Then they slit the slot and seized the first stomach, shaved it with sharp knives and knotted the sheared. Then lopped off the 4 limbs and rent off the hide. Next broke they the belly, the bowels out taking, deftly, lest they undid and destroyed the knot. They gripped the gullet and swiftly severed the wee sand from the windpipe and whipped out the guts. Then sheared out the shoulders with their sharp knives, hauled them through a little hole, left the sides whole. Then they slit up the breast and broke it in twain. And again at the gullet one then began, rending all readily right to the fork, voiding the entrails, and verily thereafter all the membranes by the ribs readily loosened. So too they cleared to the backbone rightly, even down to the haunch that hangs from the same, and heaved it all up whole and hewed it off there. And that they properly call the numbles, I deem by kind. At the fork then of the thighs they loose the lappets behind, to hew it in 2 they hie, by the backbone to unbind.
Both the head and the neck they hewed off then, and after sundered the sides swift from the chine, and the raven's feet they cast into a grove. Then they skewered each thick flank by the ribs, and hung each up by the hocks of the haunches, every fellow taking his fee as it fell to him. On a skin of the fair beast fed they their hounds, with liver and lights, and the stomach lining, and bread bathed in blood blent thereamong. Boldly they blew the kill, their hounds obeying, then rode home with the flesh tightly packed, stalwartly sounding out many stout notes. As the daylight was done, the company came to the comely castle, where our knight bides all still. In bliss by bright fires set, the Lord is come from the hill. When Gwain with him is met, there they but joy as they will.
Then the Lord commanded all be summoned to the hall, both the ladies aloft to descend with their maids. Before all the folk on the floor he bid men verily his venison to bring there before him. And all gaily and courtesy Gwain he called, and tells over the tally of full fat beasts, shows him the fine flesh shorn from the ribs. How does this sport please you? Have I won praise? Have I won thanks, thoroughly served by my craft? Yes, indeed, quoth the other. Here spoils are fairest as all I have seen this 7 year in season of winter. And I give this all to you, Gwain, quoth the man then, for according to covenant you may call it your own. That is so, quoth the knight. I say you the same. What I have worthily won in this house within, shall with as good a will be worthily yours. And he clasps his fair neck, his arms within, and kisses him in as comely a way as he can. Take you there my prize, I received no more. I granted all that were greater. That is good, quoth the Lord. Many thanks, therefore. This may be a better gift, if you would tell me where you won this same price by your own wits. That was not pledged, quoth he. Ask me no more, for you have taken what's due, none other to you I owe. They laughed and made blithe, with words worth praise, and so to supper then side by side, with dainties in plenty go.
And then by the chimney in chamber sitting, servants brought to them choice wines oft, and in their banter they agreed in that morn to fulfill the same bond they had made before, when what chance might betide, their prize to exchange. Each new thing they named at night when they met, they made accord of this covenant before all of the court, and beverage was brought forth in banter at this time. Then they lovingly took their leave at the last, each man at his leaving, going brisk to his bed. When the cock had crowed and cackled but thrice, the Lord leapt from his bed, and the liegemen each one, so that meat and a mass were swiftly delivered, and the company off to the wood ere daylight sprang to the chase. Proudly with huntsmen and horns through wilds they passed apace, uncoupled among the thorns, the hounds ran headlong race.
Soon they called for a search by the marsh side. The huntsman urged on the first hounds up. Wild cries he uttered with a wondrous noise. The hounds that heard him hastened there swiftly as fell as fast to the trail 40 at once. Then such a bang and clamor of gathered hounds rose that the rocks rang out all about. Huntsmen harried them with horn and by mouth. Then all in a pack they swung together between a pool in that place and a cruel crag. On a knoll by a cliff at the marsh side, where the rough rock had ruggedly fallen, they sped to the finding, the huntsmen after. They surrounded the crag and the knoll both, while they made sure they had well within the beast that was bayed at there by their bloodhounds. Then they beat at the bushes and bade him rise up, and he savagely swung athwart the huntsmen. A most splendid boar it was, rushed out there, solitary through age, long split from the herd. But he was still mighty, the greatest of boars, full grim when he grunted. Then grieved many, for 3 hounds at first thrust he felled to the earth, and sped him forth at great speed all unscathed. The hunt hallooed high, full loud, and cried, hey, hey, and horns to mouths hastily recalled them. Many were the merry cries of men and of hounds that brisk chased the boar, with barking and clamor to quell. Full oft he bides at bay, and downs the dog pell-mell. He harries the hound, and they full piteously yowl and yell.
Shaping to shoot him, some shoved through then, hurling their arrows at him, hitting him often, but their points were parried by bristling flanks, and their barbs would not bite there in his brow, though the smooth shaft were shattered in pieces The head skipped away wherever it hit. But when by dint of dire strokes they damaged him, then, maddened by baiting, he rushes the men, hurts them full heavily as forth he hies, and many were awed at that and drew backwards. But the Lord, on a lithe horse, lunges after him, as knight bold in the battle his bugle he blows, rallied the hounds as he rode through rank thicket, pursuing this wild swine till the sun had set. The day with these same deeds they passed in this wise, while our courteous knight lay in his bed, going gladly at home in gear full rich of hue. The lady did not forget to come to greet him too, but early she him beset to seek a change of mood.
She came to the curtain and peeped at the knight. Sir Gwain welcomed her courteously first, and she answered him again. Eager her words, sits herself soft by his side, and sweetly she laughs, and with a loving look she led with these words. Sir, if you be Gwain, it's a wonder, methinks, why one so well disposed always to good knows not how to manage his manners in company. And if any teach you to know them, you cast them from mind. You have swiftly forgot what but yesterday I taught, with all the truest tokens of talk that I could. What is that? Quoth the knight. Indeed, I know not if it be truth that you breathe, the blame is mine own. Yet, I taught you of kissing, quoth the fair dame, where countenance is fair, quick make your claim. That becomes every knight that courtesy uses. Unsay, quoth that brave man, my dear, that speech, for that I dare not do, lest I were denied. If I were spurned, I'd be wrong, indeed, to have proffered. By my faith, quoth the lady, you cannot be spurned. You are strong enough to constrain by strength, if you like, if any were so villainous as to deny you. Yes, by God, quoth Gwain, true is your speech, but threats do never thrive in the land where I live, nor any gift that is given without a good will. I am at your command to kiss when you like. You may lip when you will, and leave when you wish in a space. The lady bends her adown, and sweetly she kisses his face. Much speech they there expound of love, its grief and grace.
I would know of you, knight, that lady then said, if you are not angered by this, what is the reason that so young and lively a one as you at this time, so courteous, so knightly, as widely you're known? And from all chivalry to choose, the chief things praised are the laws of loyal love and the lore of arms. For in telling those tales of the truest of knights, all the title and text of their works is taken from how lords hazard their lives for loyal love, endured for that duty's sake dreadful trials, and after, with valor avenged and void their cares, brought bliss to the bower by bounties their own. And you, the knight, the noblest child of your age, your high fame and honor told everywhere, why, I have sat by yourself here separately twice, yet heard I never that your head held even a word that ever belonged to love, the less nor the more. And you that are so courteous and coy of your vows, ought to a young thing to yearn to show and teach some tokens of love's craft. What? Are you ignorant who garner all praise? Or else do you deem me too dull to heed your dalliance? For shame! I come hither single and sit to learn of you some game. Do teach me of your wit while my lord is away.
In good faith, quoth Gwain, may God reward you. Great is the gladness and pleasure to me that so worthy as you should wind her way hither, at pains with so poor a man as to sport with your knight with any show of favor. It sets me at ease. But to take on the travail myself of expounding true love, and touch on the themes of the texts and tales of arms to you who, I know well, wield more skill in that art by half than 100 of such as I am or ever shall be on this earth where I live. That were a manifold folly, my dear, by my troth. I would your wishes work if ever I might, as I am beholden and evermore will be servant to yourself, so save me God. Thus that lady framed her questions and tempted him off. For to win him to woe, whatever else she thought of, but he defended himself so fairly no fault it seemed, no evil on either hand, nor did they know aught but bliss. They laughed and larked full long. At the last she did him kiss. Farewell was on her tongue, and went her way with this.
Then bestirs him the knight, and rises for mass. And then the dinner was done and duly served. The knight with the ladies larked all day, but the lord of the land gallops full oft, hunts the ill-fated swine that surges by the banks, and bites the best of his hounds' backs asunder, biting at bay, till bowmen bettered him, made him head for the open for all he could do. So fast flew the arrows where those folk gathered. Yet at times the bravest he made to start till the last, so weary was he that he could not run. But with best haste he might, to a hole he wins in the bank, by a rock where runs the burn. He got the bank at his back, began to scrape the froth, foamed from his mouth, foul at the corners, and he wet his white tusks. It was irksome then to all the beaters, so bold that by him stood to harass him from afar, but nigh him no man dared go. He had hurt so many before that all were then full loath to be torn by his tusks once more. That was fierce and frenzied both.
To the Lord came himself, urged on his horse, saw the boar bide at bay, his men beside. He alights lively adown, leaves his courser, brings out a bright blade, and boldly strides forth, fast through the ford where the fell foe bides. The wild beast was wary of one with a weapon in hand. His bristles rose high, so fiercely he snorts that folk feared for the Lord, lest worst him befell. The swine straightway set on the man. The baron and boar were both in a heap in the white water. The worst had the creature, for the man marked him well as they first met, set the sharp point firm in his chest hollow, hit him up to the hilt, so the heart burst asunder, and he yielded him, snarling. Downstream was swept outright. 100 hounds him rent, that bravely could him bite. Beaters brought him to bank, and the dogs to death in fight.
There was blowing the kill on many brave horns, hallooing on high as loud as men might. Hounds bayed at the beast as bid by their masters, who of that hard chase were the chief huntsmen. Then a man who was wisest in woodcraft, with loving care to undo the beast, begins. First he hews off his head and sets it on high, then rends him roughly along the ridge of his back, brings out the bowels and broils them on coals. With bread blent therewith his hounds rewards. Then he breaks out the brawn in broad, bright slabs, and has out the entrails, as is seemly and right. Attaches the two halves wholly together, and then on a strong stake stoutly them hangs. Now with the same swine they set off for home. The boar's head was borne before the baron himself, who felled him down by the ford through force of his hand, so strong, till he saw Sir Gwain in the hall, it seemed full long. He calls and he comes again for the dues that to him belong.
The Lord, full loud he cried, laughed merrily when he saw Sir Gwain, and with joy he speaks. The good ladies were summoned, the household gathered. He shows them the board sides, and shapes him the tale of the largesse and length, the malignity also of the war on the wild swine in the woods where he fled. So the other knight full nobly commended his deeds, and praised it. The great merit that he had proved, for such brawn from a beast, the brave knight said, nor such flanks on a swine he'd not seen before. Then they handled the huge head. The knight gave praise and showed horror at it, and the lord to hear. Now, Gwain, quoth the good man, this game is your own by a firm and fast promise, as in faith you know. That is true, quoth the knight, and as surely true is that all I got I shall give you again by my troth. He clasped the lord at the neck and gently kissed him, and after that of the same he again served him there. Now are we even quit, quoth the knight, this eventide of all the covenants made here, since I came hither by law. The Lord said, by St. Giles, you are the best that I know. You'll be rich in a while, if your trade continues so.
Then they set up tables on trestles aloft, casting cloths on them, till light then wakened the walls. Wax and torches and servants sat and served food all about. Much gladness and glee gushed out therein, round the fire and the floor, in fulsome wise. And the supper and after, many noble songs, such as Christmas carols and dances new, with all manner of mirth that a man may tell of, and all that are ever courteous knight, the lady beside. Such sweetness to the man, she showed all seemingly, with secret stolen glances, that stalwart knight to please, that all wondering was the man, and wrath with himself, but he could not out of breeding spurn her advances, but dealt with her daintily, howsoever the deed might be cast. And when they had all dallied in hall, as long as their will might last, to the chamber the Lord called him, and to the hearth they passed.
And there they drank and debated and decided anew to act on the same terms on New Year's Eve. But the knight craved leave to go forth on the morn, for it was nearing the time when he must go. The Lord persuaded him not to, pressed him to linger, and said, as I am true, I pledge you my troth, you shall gain the green chapel and render your dues, sir, by New Year's light, long before prime. And so go lie in your room, take your ease, and I shall hunt in the holt and hold to the covenant, exchanging what has chanced when I spur hither. For I have tested you twice, and faithful I find you. Now, third time pays all. Think on that tomorrow. Make we merry while we may, and mind only joy, for a man may find sorrow whenever he likes. This was graciously granted, and Gwain lingered. Blithely they brought him drink, and bedwards they went with light. Sir Gwain lies down and sleeps, full still and soft all night. The Lord, who to woodcraft keeps, rises early and bright.
After mass, a morsel he and his men took. Merry was the morning, his mount he summoned. All the men that a horse were followed him after, ready set on their steeds before the hall gates. Fairest of fair was the field, for the frost clung. In red ruddiness on rack rises the sun, and full clear cast the clouds from the welkin. Huntsmen unleashed the hounds by a holt side. Rocks and woods rang out with the cry of the horns. Some hounds fell to the track where the fox lurked, oft traversing the trail by dint of their wiles. A little one cried, "Scent!" The huntsman to him called. His fellows fell to panting, full thick, running forth in a rabble on the right track. And fox frisked before them. They found him soon, and when they had him in sight, pursued him fast, marking him clearly with wrathful noise, and he twists and turns through many a tangled grove, doubles back, and hearkens by hedges full off. At the last, by a little ditch, he leaps over a thicket, steals out full silent by the side of a valley, thinks to slip from the wood by guile from the hounds. Then he came, ere he knew it, to a fine hunt station where 3 hounds in a cleft threatened him together, all gray. There he started aside, and boldly he did stray, with all woe and life, to the wood he went away.
Then was it lively delight to listen to the hounds, when all the meat had met him, mingled together. Such curses at the sight rained down on his head, as if all the clinging cliffs clattered down in a heap. Here was he hallooed when huntsmen met him, loud was he greeted with snarling speech. There he was threatened and called thief often, and ever the hounds at his tail, that he might not tarry. Oft he was rushed at when he made for the open, and often swerved back again. So wily was Reynard, and so he led them astray, the Lord and his liegemen, in this manner by mountains till after mid-morning, while the honored knight at home happily slept within the comely curtains on that cold morn. But the lady for love could get no sleep, nor could the purpose impair pitched in her heart, but rose up swiftly and took herself thither in a merry mantle that reached the earth, that was furred full fine with purest pelts, without a coif on her head, but the noblest gems traced about her hairnet by 20s in clusters. Her fair face and her throat shone all naked, her bare breast before, and her back the same. She came in by the chamber door, and closed it after, threw open a window, and to the knight called, and roundly thus rebuked him with her rich words with cheer. Ah, man, how can you sleep? This morning is so clear. He was in slumber deep, and yet he could her hear.
In heavy depths of dreaming murmured that noble, as one who was troubled with thronging thoughts, of how destiny would that day deal him his fate at the Green Chapel, where he must meet his man, bound there to bear his buffet without more debate. But when he had fully recovered his wits, he started from dreaming and answered in haste. The lovely lady, with laughter so sweet, bent over his fair face and fully him kissed. He welcomed her worthily with noble cheer. He saw her so glorious and gaily attired, so faultless of feature and of such fine hue, bright welling joy warmed all his heart. With sweet smiling softly they slipped into mirth, that to all bliss and beauty that breaks between them they win. They spoke in words full good, much pleasure was therein. In great peril would have stood, kept not Mary her knight from sin.
That peerless princess pressed him so closely, urged him so near the edge, he felt it behooved him either to bow to her love or with loathing refuse her. He cared for his courtesy lest he were churlish, and more for the mischief if he should work sin and be traitor to that lord who'd held the dwelling. God shield us, quoth the knight, that must not befall. With loving laughter and a little he put aside all the special pleading that sprang from her mouth. Quoth the beauty to the brave, blame you deserve, if you love not the live lady that you lie next, who above all the world is wounded in heart, unless you have a leman, a lover that you like better, and firmer faith to that fair one fastened so hard that you list not lose it. That I believe. If that you tell me that truly, I pray you, by all the lovers alive, hide not the truth with guile. The knight said, "By St. John," and with gentle smile, "in faith I love no one, nor none will love the while."
These words, said the lady, are the worst words of all, but I am answered, forsooth, so that it grieves me. Kiss me now gently, and I shall go hence. I may but mourn upon earth a maid that loves much. Sighing, she stooped down and sweetly him kissed, and then she severs from him and says, as she stands, "Now, dear, at our parting, set me at ease. Give me something, a gift, if only your glove, that I may think of you, man, my mourning to lessen." "Now, indeed," quoth the knight, "I would I had here the dearest thing for your sake I own in the world. For you have deserved, forsooth, and in excess a richer reward by rights than I might reckon. But as a love token, this would profit you little. It is not to your honor to have at this time a glove of Gwain's giving to treasure, and I am here on an errand in lands unknown, and have no servants with sacks of precious things. I dislike this, lady, for your sake, at this time, but each man do as he must. Take it not ill or pine." "Nay, knight of high honors," quoth that lovesome lady fine, "though I shall have naught of yours, yet shall you have of mine."
She proffered him a rich ring of red gold work, with a sparkling stone glittering aloft that blazed brilliant beams like the bright sun. Know you well that its worth was full huge. But the knight refused it, and he readily said, "I'll have no gifts before God, my dear, at this time. I have none to give you, nor naught will I take." She offered to him eagerly, yet he her gift spurned, and swore swiftly his oath that he would not seize it. And she grieved, he refused her, and said thereafter, "Since you reject my ring, too rich I may seem, for you would not be so high beholden to me. I shall give you my girdle. That profits you less." She loosed a belt lightly that lay around her sides, looped over her girdle beneath her bright mantle. Gear it was of green silk and gold trimmed, at the edges embroidered with finger stitching, and she offered the knight and blithely besought that he would take it, though it were unworthy. But he said he might have nigh him in no wise neither gold nor treasure, ere God sent him grace to achieve the errand he had chosen there. Therefore I pray you be not displeased, and let your gift go, for I swear it I never you grant. To you I am deeply beholden, your kindness is so pleasant, and ever in heat and cold, then I'll be your true servant.
"Now, do you shun this silk," said the lady, "because it is simple in itself? And so it may seem. Lo, it is slight indeed, and so is less worthy. But whoso knew the worth woven therein, he would hold it in higher praise perchance. For whatever man is girt with this green lace, while he has it closely fastened about him, there is no man under heaven might hew him, for he may not be slain by any slight upon earth." Then the knight thought, and it came to his heart. It was a jewel, for the jeopardy judged upon him when he gained the green chapel, his fate to find. If he might slip past unslain, the slight were noble. Then he indulged her suit, and told her to speak. And she pressed the belt on him, urging it eagerly. And he granted it, and she gave it him with good will, and besought him for her sake never to reveal it, but loyally conceal it from her lord? The knight agrees that no one should know of it, indeed, but they two betimes. He thanked her as he might, with all his heart and mind. By then the gallant knight she had kissed 3 times.
Then she took her leave and left him there, for more of that man she might not get. When she is gone, Sir Gwain attires himself, rises and dresses himself in noble array, lays aside the Lovelace the lady gave him, hides it full handily where he might find it. Then swiftly to chapel took he his way, privately approached a priest, and there prayed him that he would enlighten his life and teach him better how his soul might be saved when he went hence. Then he shrove himself fully, eschewed his misdeeds, the major and minor, and mercy beseeches, and calls on the priest for absolution. And he absolved him surely, and left him so pure that doomsday might yet be declared on the morn. And then he made himself merry among the fair ladies, with comely carols and all manner of joy, more than ever before that day till the dark night in bliss. Each one had courtesy there of him, and said, he is the merriest he was ever since he came hither ere this.
Now, long in that leisure let him there abide. Yet is the Lord on his land pursuing his sport. He has done for the fox that he followed so long, as he spurred through a spinney to spy the shrew. There where he heard the hounds harry him on, Reynard came rushing through the rough grove, and all the rabble in a race right at his heels. The Lord, aware of the wild thing, warily waits, and brandishes his bright blade, drives at the beast. And it shunned the sharp edge and sought to retreat, but a hound rushed at him before e'er he might, and right before the horse's feet they fell on him all, and worried the wily one with a wrathful noise. The Lord swiftly alighted then and latched on, raised him full suddenly out of the ravening mouths, holds him high over his head, halloos full loud, while there bayed at him many brave hounds. Huntsmen hied them thither with horns full many, sounding the rally aright till they saw their lord. When his noble company had all come in, all that ever bore bugle blew at once, and all the others hallooed who had no horn. It was the merriest meet that ever men heard, the right roar raised there for Reynard's soul from every man's throat. Their hounds then they reward, their heads they fondle and stroke, and then they take Reynard and strip him of his coat.
And then they hurry for home, for it was nigh night, striking up strongly on their stout horns. The Lord alights at last at his much-loved home, finds fire upon hearth, the knight there beside, Sir Gwain the good, who glad was withal, for among the ladies he was joyfully beloved. He wore a gown of blue that reached to the ground. His surcoat suited him well, all soft with fur, and his hood of the same hung from his shoulder, trimmed all with ermine, were both all about. He met with the Lord in the midst of the floor, and all with joy did him greet. And gladly he said, I shall fulfill the first our contract now, that we settled so speedily, sparing no drink. Then he clasped the Lord and kissed him thrice, as strongly and steadily as he well could. By Christ, quoth the other, you found much luck in transacting this trade, if your profit was good. You need not care about profit, quoth the other, as I've promptly paid over the profit I took. Marry, quoth the other, my own falls behind, for I have hunted all this day, and naught have I got but this foul foxfell. The fiend takes such goods, and that's a poor price to pay for such precious things as you so have given me here. 3 such kisses so good. Enough, quoth Sir Gawain, I thank you by the rood. And how the fox was slain the Lord told as they stood.
With mirth and minstrelsy, with meals at will, they made as merry as men might, with laughter of ladies and jesting with words. Gawain and the good man, so glad are they both, must be, lest the diners are drunkards or dotards. Both master and men played many jokes, till the time it was come that they must sever. Then humbly his leave of the Lord at first takes the noble knight, and fairly him thanks. For such a splendid sojourn as I have had here, your honor, at this high feast, the high king reward you, and I would give myself as one of your men, if you so like. But I must needs, as you know, move on tomorrow, if you'll grant me a guide to show, as you promised, the way to the Green Chapel, as God wills for me to be dealt on New Year's Day, the doom my fate brings. In good faith, quoth the good man, by my good will, all that ever I promised you, I shall hold ready. Then he assigned him a servant to show him the way and conduct him through the hills so he'd not delay. And faring through forest and thick set the shortest way, he'd weave. The Lord Gawain did thank, such honor he did receive. Then of the ladies of rank, the knight must take his leave.
Bad care and kissing he spoke to them still, and full heartfelt thanks he pressed on them, and they yielded him again replies the same, commending him to Christ then with frozen sighs. So from the company he courteously parts. Each man that he met, he gave him his thanks for his service and for the solicitous care that they had shown busied about him in serving. And all were as sorry to sever from him there, as if they had dwelt nobly with that knight ever. And the lads with lights led him to his chamber, and blithely brought him to bed to be at his rest. If he did not sleep soundly, I dare say nothing, for he had much on the morrow to mind if he would in thought. Let him lie there quite still, he is near what he sought, and quiet you a while until I tell you of all that they wrought.
Now nears the new year, and the night passes. The day drives away dark as the deity bids, but wild weather awoke in the world outside. Clouds cast cold keenly down to the earth, with wind enough from the north to flail the flesh. The snow sleeted down sharp and nipped the wild. The whistling wind wailed from the heights and drove each dale full of drifts full great. The knight listened full well as he lay in his bed. Though he closes his lids, full little he sleeps. For with each cock that crew, he knew well his tryst. Deftly he dressed himself ere the day sprang. For there was a lighted lamp gleamed in his chamber. He called to his servant, who promptly replied, and bade him bring a coat of mail and saddle his mount. The man rises up and fetches him his clothes, and attires Sir Gawain in splendid style. First he clad him in clothes to ward off the cold, then in his harness that burnished was kept, both his belly armor and plate polished full bright, the rings of his rich mailcoat rubbed free of rust, and all was as fresh as at first, and he to give thanks was glad. He put on each piece, and in bright armor clad, fairest from here to Greece, his steed to be brought he bade.
While he wound himself in the most splendid of weeds, his coat armor with its badge of clear deeds, set out upon velvet with virtuous stones, embellished and bound about it embroidered seams, in fair lined within with fine furs. Yet he forgot not the lace, the lady's gift, that Gwain did not fail of for his own good. When he had bound the blade on his smooth haunches, then he wound the love token twice him about, swiftly swathed it about his waist sweetly that night. The girdle of green silk that gallant well suited, upon that royal red cloth that rich was to show. But it was not for its richness he wore this girdle, nor for pride in the pendants, though polished they were, and though the glittering gold gleamed at the ends, but to save himself when it behooved him to suffer, to abide baneful stroke without battling with blade or knife. With that the knight all sound goes swift to risk his life. All the men of renown he thanks, prepares for strife.
Then was Gringolet readied, that was huge and great, and had been stabled snugly and in secure wise. He was eager to gallop that proud horse then. The knight went to him and gazed at his coat and said soberly to himself, and swore by the truth, here are many in this mote that of honor think. The man who maintains it, joy may he have. The fair lady through life may love her befall. Thus if they for charity cherish a guest, and hold honor in their hand, the Lord them reward, who upholds the heavens on high, and also you all. And if I should live for any while upon earth, I would grant you some reward readily, if I might. Then steps he into the stirrup and strides aloft. His man showed him his shield, on shoulder he slung it, gives spur to Gringolet with his gilded heels, and he starts forth on the stones, pausing no longer to prance. His servant to horse got then, who bore his spear and lance. This castle to Christ I commend, may he grant it good chance.
The drawbridge was let down, and the broad gates unbarred and flung open upon both sides. The knight blessed himself swiftly, and passed the boards, praised the porter kneeling before the prince, who gives him God and good day that Gwain he save, and goes on his way with one man, who shall teach him the path to that perilous place where the grievous blow he shall receive. They brushed by banks where boughs were bare, they climbed by cliffs where clung the cold. The heavens were up high, but ugly thereunder. Mist moved on the moors, melted on mountains. Each hill had a hat, a mist mantle huge. Brooks boiled and broke their banks about, sheer shattering on shores where they downflowed. Well wild was the way where they by woods rode, till it was soon time that the sun in that season does rise. They were on a hill full high, the white snow lay beside. The man that rode him by bade his master abide.
For I have brought you hither, sir, at this time, and now you are not far from that noted place that you have sought and spurred so specially after. But I may, forsooth, since I know you, and you are a lord full of life, whom I well love. If you will hark my wit, you might do better. The place that you pace to full perilous is held. There lives a man that wastes the worst upon earth, for he is strong and stir and loves to strike, and more men than he upon any middle earth. His body bigger than the best four that are in Arthur's house, Hector or others. He makes it so to chance that at the green chapel that none passes by the place so proud in arms that he but does him to death by dint of his hand. For he is a mighty man and shows no mercy. For it be curl or chaplain that rides by the chapel, monk or priest of the mass, or any man else, he is as quick to kill them as to live himself. Therefore I say, as true as you sit in the saddle, come there and you will be killed if he has his way. Trust me truly then, though you had 20 lives to spend. He has lived there of yore and battled to the great extent, and 'gainst his blows full sore you may not yourself defend.
Therefore, good Sir Gawain, let him alone and go some other way for God's own sake. Course some other country where Christ might you speed, and I shall hie me home again and undertake that I shall swear by God and all his good saints, so help me God and the holy things and oaths enough, I shall loyally keep your secret and loose no tale that ever you fled from any man that I know of. Grand merci, quoth Gwain, and galled, he said, it is worthy of you, man, to wish for my good, and loyally keep my secret. I know that you would, but keep it ever so quiet if I passed here and fled away in fear in the form that you tell of. I were a cowardly knight. I might not be excused, for I will go to the chapel, whatever chance may befall, and talk with that same fellow in whatever way I wish, whether it's weal or woe, as fate may to me behave. Though he be a stern fellow, to manage armed with a stave, full well does the Lord know his servants how to save.
Marry, quoth the other man, now you spell it out, that you will take all your own trouble on yourself. If you will lose your life, I'll not you delay. Have your helm here on your head, your spear in your hand, and ride down the same track by yon rock side, till you're brought to the bottom of the wild valley. Then look a little on the level, to your left hand, and you shall see that vale, that self-same chapel, and the burly giant on guard that it keeps. Now farewell, in God's name, Gwain the noble. For all the gold in the ground I'll not go with you, nor bear fellowship through this forest 1 foot further. With that, the man in the wood tugs at his bridle, hits his horse with his heels as hard as he might, leaps away over the land, and leaves the knight there, alone. By God's self, quoth Gwain, I will neither weep nor groan. To God's will I bend again, and I am sworn as his own.
So he gives spur to Gringolet and picks up the path, pushing on through, by a bank at the side of a wood, rode down the rough slope right to the dale, and then he gazed all about, and wild it seemed, and saw no sign of shelter anywhere near, but high banks and steep upon either side, and rough rugged crags with gnarled stones, so the sky seemed to be grazed by their barbs. Then he halted and reined in his horse a while, and scanned all about this chapel to find. He saw no such thing either side, and thought it quite strange, save a little mound, as it were, off in a field, a bald barrow by a bank beside the burn. By a force of the flood that flowed down there, the burn bubbled therein as if it were boiling. The knight urges on his mount and comes to the mound, alights there lightly, and ties to a lime tree the reins of his horse round a rough branch. Then he goes to the barrow, and about it he walked, debating with himself what it might be. It had a hole at each end, and on either side, and was overgrown with grass in great knots, and all was hollow within, naught but an old cave, or a crevice in an old crag. He could not distinguish it well. Who knows, Lord, quoth the gentle knight, whether this be the Green Chapel? Here might, about midnight, the devil his matins tell.
Now indeed, quoth Gwain, desolation is here. This oratory is ugly with weeds overgrown. Well is it seemly for a man clad in green to deal his devotion here in the devil's wise. How I feel it is the fiend in my 5 senses who set me this meeting to strike at me here. This is a chapel of mischance. Bad luck it betide. It is the most cursed church that ever I came to. With high helm on his head and lance in his hand, he roamed up to the roof of that rough dwelling. Then he heard from that high hill, from that hard rock beyond that brook, on the bank, a wondrous brave noise. What? Clang through the cliff, as if it would cleave it, as if a grindstone, one ground, a great scythe. What? It whirled and wetted as water in a mill. What? It rushed and rang, revolting to hear. Then, by God, quoth Gwain, this here I believe is arranged by reverence to reverence me, to greet rank by rote. That God's will work, alas, will help me not a mote. My life, though it be lost, I dread no wondrous note.
Then the knight called out on high, who stands in this stead my tryst to uphold? For now is good Gwain grounded right here. If any man wills aught wind hither fast, either now or never his needs to further. Abide, quoth one on the bank above his head, and you shall have all in haste, I promised you once. Yet he then turned to his tumult swiftly a while, and at wedding he worked ere he would alight. And then he thrust by a crag and came out by a hole, whirling out of the rocks with a fell weapon, a Danish axe, new honed for dealing the blow, with a biting blade, bow bent to the haft, ground on a grindstone 4 feet broad, no less by that Lovelace gleaming full bright. And the giant in green was garbed as at first, both the looks and the legs, and the locks and the beard, save that firm on his feet he finds his ground, sets the haft to the stones, and stalks beside it. When he came to the water he would not wade, he hopped over on his axe, and boldly he strides, blazing with wrath, on a bit of field brought about in snow. Sir Gwain the man did greet, he bowed to him, nothing low. The other said, now, sir sweet, men may trust your word, I owe.
Gwain, quoth the green man, God may you guard. Indeed, you are welcome, knight, to my place, and you have timed your travel as true men should. And you know the covenant pledged between us. At this time, 12 months gone, you took what befell, that I should, at this new year, promptly requite. And we are in this valley verily alone. Here no ranks to sever us, serve as you will. Haft off your helm off your head, and have here your pay. Ask no more debate than I did of you then, when you whipped off my head at a single blow. Nay, by God, quoth Gwain, who lent me a soul, I shall bear you no grudge for the grief that befalls. Strike but the one stroke, and I shall stand still, and offer no hindrance. Come, work as you like, I swear. He leant down his neck and bowed, and showed the white flesh all bare, as if he were no way cowed, for to shrink he would not dare.
Then the man in green readies him swiftly, girds up his grim blade to smite Gwain. With all the strength in his body he bears it aloft, manages it mightily, as if he would mar him. Had he driven it down as direly as he aimed, one had been dead of the deed who was dauntless ever. But Gwain glanced at the grim blade sideways as it came gliding down on him to destroy him, and his shoulders shrank a little from the sharp edge. The other man, with a shrug, the slice withholds, and then reproves the prince with many proud words. You are not Gwain, quoth the man, held so great, that was never afraid of the host by hill or by vale, for now you flinch for fear ere you feel harm? Such cowardice of that knight have I never heard. I neither flinched nor fled, friend, when you let fly, nor cast forth any quibble in King Arthur's house. My head flew off at my feet, yet fled I never. Yet you, ere any harm haps, are fearful at heart. And I ought to be branded the better man, I say, therefore. Quoth Gawain, I flinched once, yet so will I no more. Though if my head fall on the stones, I cannot it restore.
Be brisk, man, by your faith, and bring me to the point. Deal me my destiny, and do it out of hand. For I shall stand your stroke and start no more, till your axes hit me. Have here my troth. Have at you then, quoth the other, and heaves it aloft, and glares as angrily as if he were mad. He menaces him mightily, but touches him not, swiftly withholding the hand, ere it might hurt. Gwain gravely bides, and moves not a muscle, but stands still as a stone or the stump of a tree that is riven in the rocky ground with roots 100. Then merrily again he spoke, the man in green. Ha! So now you have your heart whole, it me behooves. Hold safe now your knighthood Arthur gave you, and keep your neck from this cut, if ever it may. Gwain full fiercely with anger then said, Why, thrash on, you wild man, threaten no longer. It seems your heart is warring with your own self. Forsooth, quoth the other, so fiercely you speak. I'll not a moment longer delay your errand, I vow. Then he takes up his stance to strike, pouts lips and puckers his brow. Nothing for him to like, who hopes for no rescue now.
Speaker unmutes.
Up the weapon lifts lightly, is let down fair, and the blade's border beside the bare neck. Though heaved heavily, it hurt him not more, but nicked him on one side, and severed the skin. The sharp edge sank in the flesh through the fair fat, so that bright blood over his shoulders shot to the earth. And when the knight saw his blood blotting the snow, he spurted up feet first, more than a spear length, seized swiftly his helm, and on his head cast it, shrugged with his shoulders, his fine shield under, broke out his bright sword, and bravely he spoke. Never since he was a babe born of his mother had he ever in this world a heart half so blithe. Back, man, with your blade, and brandish no more. I have received a stroke in this place without strife, and if you offer another, I'll readily requite you, and yield it to you swiftly again. Of that be you sure as foe. But one strike to me here falls. The covenant stated so, arranged in Arthur's hall. So lay your weapon now low.
The other then turned away, and on his axe rested, set the haft to the earth, and leant on the head, and looked at the Lord, who held to his ground. How doughty and dreadless, enduring he stands armed. Without awe in his heart, he him liked. Then he spoke merrily in a mighty voice, and with a ringing roar to the knight he said, Bold man, be not so fierce in this field. No man here has mistreated you, been unmannerly, nor behaved but by covenant at king's court made. I hit with a stroke, and you have it, and are well paid. I release you from the rest of all other rights. If I had been livelier, a buffet perchance, I could have worked more willfully to bring your anger. First I menaced you merrily with a single feint, and rent you with no riving cut, rightly afford for the pledge that we made on that very first night. For you truthfully kept troth and dealt with me true. All the gain you gave me as good men should. The next blow for the morn man I proffered. You kissed my fair wife. The kisses were mine. For both these days I brought you but two bare faiths, without scathe. Truth for the truth restore, then man need dread no wraith. On the third you failed for sure, so took that blow in faith.
For it is mine that you wear the same woven girdle that my own wife gave it you. I know it well, forsooth. Now I know well your kisses and conduct too. For the wooing of my wife I wrought it myself. I sent her to test you, and truly I think you the most faultless man that was ever afoot. As a pearl beside whitened pea is more precious, so is Gwain in good faith besides other good knights. But here, sir, you lacked a little, wanting in loyalty, but that was no wily work, nor wooing neither, but for love of your life, so I blame you the less. The other strong man in study stood a great while, so aggrieved for grief he grimaced within, all the blood of his breast burnt in his face, and he shrank for shame for all the men said. The first words the knights could frame on that field, curse upon cowardice and covetous both, you are in villainy and vice that virtue distress. Then he caught at the knot and pulled it loose, and fair flung the belt at the man himself. Lo, there is falseness, foul it may fall, for you fear you're not cowardice me taught. To accord with covetousness, forsake my kind, largest in loyalty that belongs to knights. Now I am faulted and false, and ever afeard. From both treachery and untrue comes sorrow and care. I confess to you, knight, here, still, my fault in this affair. Let me understand your will. Henceforth I shall beware.
Then laughed the other lord, and lightly said, I hold it happily made whole, the harm that I had. You are confessed so clean, cleared of your faults, have done penance plain at the point of my blade. I hold you absolved of that sin, as pure and as clean as though you were never at fault since first you were born. And I give you, sir, the girdle that is gold hemmed. It is as green as my gown, Sir Gwain. You may think upon this same trial when you throng forth among princes of price. This, the pure token of the test at the Green Chapel to chivalrous knights. And you shall this new year come back to my castle, and we shall revel away the remnant of this rich feast. I mean, thus urged him hard the Lord, and said, with my wife, I ween, we shall bring you in accord. Who was your enemy king?
Nay, forsooth, quoth the knight, and seized his helm, doffed it deliberately, and dealt his thanks. I have sojourned enough. May luck you betide, and may he yield you reward that rewards all men. And commend me to the courteous, your comely wife, both the one and the other, my honored ladies, that thus their knight with a trick have cunningly beguiled. But it is no wonder for a fool to run mad and through wiles of women be won to sorrow. For so was Adam on earth with one beguiled, and Solomon with many such. Samson too, Delilah dealt him his doom, and David thereafter was blinded by Bathsheba and suffered much ill. Since these were wounded with wiles, it were wise to love them well and believe them not, if a lord could. For these were the finest formerly, favored by fate excellently of all those under heaven's rule ill-used. And all these were beguiled with women that they used. If I am now beguiled, I think I should be excused.
For your girdle, quoth Gwain, God reward you.
That I will wear with good will, not for the white gold, nor the stuff, the silk, nor the slender pendants, its worth, nor richness, nor for the fine working. But as a sign of my sin, I shall see it often when I ride in renown, remorseful, remembering the fault and the frailty of perverse flesh, how it tends to entice to the tarnish of sin. And thus, when pride shall stir me in prowess of arms, one look at this Lovelace shall lower my heart. But one thing I would you pray, displease you never. Since you are lord of yonder land where I lingered, say you by your knighthood, may he reward you that upholds the heavens and on high sits, how you tell your true name, and then no more. That I shall tell you truly, quoth the other then. Betelac de Hodezer I am in this land, through might of Morgan le Fay that dwells in my house, and is mistress of magic. By crafts well learned the mysteries of Merlin. Many has she taken. She has dealt in depth full dearly sometime with that excellent sage, and that knows all your knights at home. Morgan the goddess, therefore, is now her name. None has such high haughtiness, that she cannot make full tame.
She sent me in this same wise to your wide hall, for to assay its pride, test if all that were truth that runs on the great renown of the Round Table. She worked all this wonder your wits to ravel, to grieve Guinevere and to bring her to die. Aghast at that same ghoul with his ghostly speech, with his head in his hand before the high table. That is she that is at home, the ancient lady. She is even your aunt, Arthur's half-sister, daughter of Tintagel's duchess, that dear Uther after had Arthur upon, who is now your king. Therefore, sir, I entreat you, come to your aunt, make merry in my house. My men do love you, and I wish you as well manned by my faith as any man under God for your great truth. Yet Gwain denied him. Nay, he would in no way. They clasped and kissed, commending each other to the Prince of Paradise, parted in the cold where they stood. Gwain on steed I ween, to the king goes as fast as he could, and the man in emerald green, whithersoever he would.
Wild ways in the world Gwain now rides, on Gringolet, he whom grace had gifted with life. Often he harbored in houses, and often outside, had adventures much in the vales, often vanquisher, that I do not at this time intend to recall. The hurt was all whole that he'd had in his neck, and the bright belt he bore all thereabout obliquely as a baldric bound at his side, tied under his left arm, the lace with a knot, as token he was tainted with guilt of his fault. And so he comes to the court all safe and sound. Delight dawned in that dwelling when the great knew that good Gwain had come, and thought it gain. The king kisses the knight, and the queen also, and then many staunch knights sought to salute him, to know how he had fared. And faithfully he tells, confessing all the cost of the cares he had suffered, what chanced at the chapel, the cast of its lord, the love of the lady, the lace at the last. The nick in the neck he naked them showed, that he had for his lie from the Lord's hands in blame. He was pained, he must tell, he groaned for grief at the same. Blood ran to his face pell-mell when he showed the mark, for shame.
Lo, Lord, quoth the knight, and handled the lace, this is the belt of blame I bear at my neck. This is the hurt and the harm that I have learned through the cowardice and covetousness I caught there. This is the token of the untruth I am taken in, and I must needs to wear it while I may last. For none may hide harm done and go unscathed, for where it is once attached, depart will it never. The king comforts the knight and all the court also, laughing loudly thereat and lovingly agreeing, those lords and ladies that belonged to the table, that each born to the brotherhood a baldric should have, a belt oblique about him of a bright green, and for the sake of that night the same hue. For it was accorded to the renown of the round table, and he that had it was honored evermore after, as is borne out by the best books of romance. Thus in Arthur's day this adventure was tried, and the books of Brutus thereof bear witness. Since Brutus, the bold baron, first bent hither, after the siege and assault had ceased at Troy, there is many an adventure born, befallen such ere this. Now who bears the crown of thorn, may he bring us to his bliss. Amen.
Lo, Lord, quoth the loader, and the lasse hondelid. This is the bende of this blama I bear in my neck. This is the latha and the losse that I lacht habe, of cowardice and covetisi that I have kracht there. This is the token of untrouwthe that I am tan inne, and I moet nedes hit were will I my last. For man my heden his harme, but unhap ne my heat. For their heat honest is tachet twine will heat never. The king comfortes the knecht, and alle the court als, lazen lode thereat, and loofly accorden, that lordes and ladies that longed to the table. Each burn of the brotherhede a bouderik schulde have, a bende abelef him a boete of a brichte grena. And that, for sake of that sege, in sweat to wear, for that what's accorded the renown of the ronde table. And he honored that heat had evermore after, as it is brevet in the best book of romance. Thus in Arthurus die this assunter betida, the Brutus Bocchus thereof beres witnessa. Sif in Brutus, the bolde burna, bosed hither first, after the sega and the assault what cessed at Troia iwisa. Moni aunteres hera beforna, have fallen sutra erdis. Now that Hera, the crown of thorna, he bring us to his bliss. Amen. Honi soit qui mal pense.